My sister, Chloe, the family's brilliant star who measured worth in brand names and horsepower, stood frozen, her face a pale mask in the harsh glare of the garage lights. Her perfectly curated world was shattering, and the Hammer was a matte black armored vehicle that took up most of the space. I methodically checked the clasps on my tactical vest, the familiar clicks a stark counterpoint to her ragged breathing. My cousin Leo, a tech specialist who operated in the same shadowy world I did, never looked up from his console inside the truck. "Anna," he said, his voice tight with urgency, "we have satellite confirmation. Asset is compromised. Operation Nightfall is a go. Wheels up in 5. I adjusted the comms earpiece, my gaze fixed on the mission ahead, not on the family drama imploding behind me. The personnel had to vanish. "Acknowledged," I said into the mic, my voice flat, professional, a voice she had never heard. "Phoenix is rolling." I saw her lips form the word, a name she'd only heard whispered on. The news in connection with averted disasters and daring rescues. "Phoenix?" She breathed, the sound swallowed by the cavernous space. That's you?" To understand the look of sheer terror on my sister's face, to grasp why the name Phoenix turned her world upside down, you have to go back 2 hours, earlier, to the restaurant parking lot where she decided my 2012 Honda Civic was the greatest shame our family had ever endured. We were leaving our father's birthday dinner. I was Anna, the timid State Department archivist with a boring but stable job. She was Chloe, the golden child marketing manager whose life was a constant performance of success. In the valet area, under the warm glow of the restaurant sign, she pulled me aside. "Seriously, Anna?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You parked it right out front? People are staring. You make us look broke with that Honda." She gestured wildly at my car, a vehicle chosen specifically for its ability to be ignored. It was the same dismissive gesture she'd used for my practical shoes, my simple watch. Every piece of my carefully constructed, low-profile cover. "It's humiliating," she declared. "Either buy a decent car or don't come to the next family event." Her voice was loud enough to carry. I saw my boss, Deputy Director Evans, walking past with his wife. He gave me a brief, unreadable look before moving on. A cold dread, sharp and acidic, washed over me. This wasn't just Chloe being cruel. This was a breach. It was a spotlight I had spent years avoiding, and she had just aimed it right at me. A cold fury settled deep in my stomach. I said nothing, got in my car, and drove away, ignoring the string of angry texts that followed. The professional risk had just made this personal slight unforgivable. My family operated on a very simple, unspoken set of rules. Rule number 1, Chloe was the sun, and the rest of us were minor planets orbiting her glow. I saw this play out every holiday, every birthday, every minor family get-together. I remember one Christmas with perfect, painful clarity. My sister, Chloe, the family's golden girl, was holding court in the living room, regaling everyone with a story about a massive marketing deal she'd just closed. She spoke in brand-friendly buzzwords, painting a picture of herself as a warrior in a boardroom, and our parents were captivated. The grand finale was the gift from my father, a gleaming designer watch in a velvet-lined box. As she snapped it onto her wrist, I didn't just see the watch. I saw the advanced coding course I'd wanted to take that was deemed too expensive. I saw the down payment for my Honda that I had to save for myself because money was tight. I saw a decade's worth of carefully explained budget constraints, all rendered meaningless, by a single extravagant gift meant to reward a success they could understand. Later, I tried to share something of my own. I spoke about a complex archival project I'd just wrapped up, my sanitized, boring cover for a successful mission debriefing that had taken 3 months of my life. My father, Robert, a retired sales executive who believed a life's value could be found on a balance sheet, gave me a placating pat on the hand. "That's nice, dear," he said, his eyes already drifting back towards Chloe. "At least it's a stable government job." The condescension was a physical thing, a heavy blanket I was forced to wear. Chloe just smirked from across the room, the new watch catching the light. It was their narrative, and they were sticking to it. In their world, I was the librarian, quiet, fragile, and utterly unremarkable. Later that evening, my mother, Linda, a woman who treated family harmony as a religion and truth as an optional heresy, cornered me in the kitchen. She wrung her hands, A gesture I knew meant she was about to deliver a well-meaning but completely useless platitude. "You know how your sister is, all flash," she whispered, as if the walls might be listening. "Don't let her get to you. Your quiet life is a blessing, Anna. No stress, no drama." I just nodded. Arguing was pointless. She couldn't comprehend that her idea of a blessing was, for me, a cage built of low expectations. That quiet, stress-free life she imagined for me was fiction. The reality was a different world entirely, a world of absolute silence and crushing pressure. It existed in a soundproofed, secure room deep in the bowels of a featureless government building, a place they called a skiff. There were no loud stories here, no performative celebrations. There was only the low hum of servers, the glow of giant monitors displaying satellite, feeds and data streams, and the weight of lives hanging in the balance. I was part of a non-combatant evacuation planning cell, and an embassy in a volatile region was about to be overrun. The room was thick with tension. Colonels and senior officers were arguing, their voices tight with stress, as they debated the merits of two equally terrible exfiltration routes. I wasn't listening to them. I was listening to the silence, the digital silence. I was scanning raw signal intelligence, hunting for patterns in the chaos. And then I saw it, a faint repeating burst of encrypted data on a supposedly quiet frequency along their primary escape route. It was ghost chatter. It was the digital footprint of an ambush lying in wait, a trap no one else had seen. I stood up, my own voice cutting through the arguments. "Sir, the SIGINT shows ghost chatter on the MSR Bravo." All eyes turned to me. I had the attention of my superior, General Markovich, a grizzled JSOC liaison, with eyes that missed nothing and a legendary intolerance for incompetence. He ignored the sputtering colonels and looked directly at me. He didn't care about my rank or title. He cared about the data. "I recommend we divert to the tertiary exfil point, codenamed Pathfinder. We sacrifice speed," I said, keeping my voice steady, "but we maintain operational security." There was a long, tense pause. The general stared at the map, then back at me. He trusted my analysis more than the assumptions of men who outranked me by 2 decades. He nodded once. "Make it happen, Phoenix." Phoenix, the name they gave me in this world. Names that meant ability and survival. The contrast was a dizzying, painful irony. At home, I was Anna, the librarian, a person so fragile and unassuming. She couldn't possibly handle the complexities of the real world. My family saw a woman who needed a quiet life because they thought she was incapable of navigating a loud one. But in this room, the one that actually mattered, I was the one navigating life and death. Scenarios while men twice my age held their breath, waiting for my recommendation. They had written my story for me, Anna, the quiet librarian. They were comfortable with that fiction. But after that night in the parking lot, I knew a page was about to be turned. I didn't know then that Chloe herself would insist on being there to read it. When I got home, the anger was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It wasn't just the humiliation, it was the carelessness, the sheer recklessness of it. My entire career, my entire life, was built on a foundation of being invisible. Chloe had just lit a fire on my front lawn for the entire world to see. I sat at my laptop, the screen illuminating a face set in stone. There were protocols for this. I began typing the mandatory incident report, the words feeling clinical and detached. Unwarranted public attention, potential cover compromise. It was a bureaucratic headache, a direct consequence of my family's inability to see beyond their own reflection. As my fingers moved across the keyboard, a separate secure phone on my desk buzzed once. It was a sound I hadn't heard in months, a sound that instantly vaporized every other thought in my head. I picked it up. The screen showed a single coded phrase: Nightfall protocol activated. Just like that, the family drama, the anger, the insult, it all evaporated. It was noisy. The mission was the signal. My training took over, a current of pure focus that washed away everything else. There was no room for Anna the sister, there was only the objective. My first move was automatic. I sent a single character confirmation message, a simple Y that would set a dozen hidden gears in motion, alerting my handler and my designated local support, my cousin Leo. My body was already moving, my steps purposeful as I crossed the living room to a blank section of the wall. I pressed my thumb to a hidden biometric panel, then leaned in for the retinal scan. There was a faint hiss of hydraulics as a section of the wall slid away, revealing a locker of matte black tactical gear. My strategy was no longer about feelings or family, it was about procedure. About a practiced sequence of movements that I could perform in my sleep. I pulled out the lightweight body armor, the satisfying zip of the vest a familiar comfort. The comms earpiece slid into place, followed by the sidearm holster, which I buckled securely to my hip. Every movement was silent, efficient, and devoid of hesitation. I was fully geared and ready, my hand on the button to open the garage, when a furious pounding echoed from my front door. It was frantic, insistent. It was Chloe. Of all the nights I thought, a cold wave of frustration washing over me. A level 4 alert is active, and my spoiled sister is at the door, demanding an apology for the crime of owning a reliable car. I had two choices: ignore her and risk a scene that would alert the entire neighborhood, or let her in and risk her seeing what was behind the garage door. The pounding grew louder. My duty to the mission came first. I opened the door, and in doing so, I opened her eyes forever. I let Chloe storm in, her voice already rising with the familiar cadence of a lecture I'd heard 1,000 times. I didn't turn to face her. The mission clock was ticking in my head, and her words were just background, noise, the static of a world I was already leaving behind. I walked with purpose through the living room and into the small mudroom that connected to the garage. She followed me, her footsteps echoing my own, her voice growing more shrill as her frustration mounted. "I am so sick of you not caring, Anna. Dad is disappointed, Mom is embarrassed, and you just float through life in that beige little bubble of yours." Her words were meant to be daggers. Disappointment, embarrassment, those were the twin pillars of my family's judgment, reserved for any choice that didn't align with their narrow definition of success. I thought of my father's face at dinner, a mask of strained politeness. I thought of my mother's frantic, placating whispers. This moment was the culmination of every condescending pat on the head, every dismissive comment about my quiet life. I reached the interior door to the garage and placed my hand on the cool metal of the handle. Chloe was still talking, her monologue reaching its crescendo. I didn't hear the rest. My thumb found the garage door opener on the wall, and I pressed it without breaking stride. There was a low groan, then the rumble of the heavy door beginning its slow ascent. The sound cut through her rant, and she finally fell silent. A sliver of cold white LED light appeared at the bottom, growing wider and wider, spilling into the dim mudroom and throwing our shadows into sharp relief. She stepped up beside me, ready to continue her attack, but the words died on her lips. Her angry expression melted, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. In the space where she expected to see my humble Honda and some lawn equipment, another reality was parked. It wasn't a luxury car, it was a heavily modified matte black Ford Expedition. Its surface seemed to drink the light, and its windows were tinted to an impenetrable black. It was clearly armored, sitting heavy on thick run-flat tires. A compact satellite dish was folded on the roof next to a suite of other antennas I knew could intercept a whisper from a mile away. The interior of the vehicle was aglow with the cool blue and green light of multiple electronic screens, casting an ethereal light on my cousin Leo, who was already inside, running final diagnostics. Chloe's eyes darted around, trying to process the impossible scene. The perfectly organized tool wall held not wrenches and screwdrivers, but Pelican cases and charging stations for equipment she couldn't name. The air smelled of ozone, clean metal, and rubber, not oil and cut grass. Her gaze shifted from the monstrous vehicle to my face, her own contorted in disbelief. Leo's voice, clipped and professional, cut through the silence. "Comms are secure. Encrypted uplink is stable. We're green across the board, Phoenix." He handed a tablet out the window to me, its screen displaying a detailed satellite image of a remote mountain pass. Chloe flinched at the code name. "Leo, what are you doing here?" She stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Phoenix? What is going on?" I ignored her completely. My focus was absolute. This was my live competency test, an unplanned demonstration for an audience of one. I ran through my pre-mission checklist, my movements economical and sure. I checked the seal on my comms earpiece, did a final tension check on the straps of my vest, and ran my thumb over the handle of my sidearm, ensuring it was seated correctly in its holster. I scanned the contents of my medical kit, my mind cataloging every item. My voice, when I spoke, was not the quiet, gentle tone of Anna. It was the command voice of Phoenix, calm, authoritative, and cold. Pointing to a sector on the tablet screen, I spoke to Leo. Their primary route is blocked here. They'll be funneled south. Have air support on standby for a hot extract at Rally Point Sierra. No deviations. It wasn't just the truck that broke her. It was the language. It was the casual authority with which I spoke of things like hot extracts and rally points. It was seamless teamwork with Leo. Above all, it was the name. Phoenix. A name she would have heard on the news. A shadowy government agent credited with resolving a hostage crisis in Eastern Europe a few years back. In her mind, it was a folk hero, a character from a movie. Not her quiet, boring sister who worked in an archive. She finally understood. The boring desk job, the cheap car, the quiet demeanor, the refusal to care about status symbols. It wasn't failure. It was a fortress. It was a cover. Her eyes drifted to the corner of the garage, where my little Honda Civic was parked. It looked like a child's toy next to the armored truck. She looked at the car she had mocked, the object of her profound embarrassment, and for the first time she saw it for what it was. Not a symbol of poverty, but a tool of invisibility. Her voice trembled, thick with a dawning, sickening realization. All this time, I was making fun of you for being safe. I stopped my final check and turned to look at her, really look at her, for the first time since she'd arrived. My eyes met hers, and I let her see the abyss that separated our two worlds. There was no anger in me, only a vast, cold distance. Safety is a luxury I provide for others, I said, my voice even. It's not one I get for myself. She stood there, speechless, as I climbed into the driver's seat. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. She finally saw me, but the person she was seeing was already gone. I put the truck in gear, the engine a low, powerful rumble that vibrated through the driver's seat. I didn't look back at Chloe. I couldn't. In my rearview camera, I saw her silhouette shrink as I pulled out into the night. Then, the heavy garage door began its descent, a thick curtain of steel sliding down, slowly sealing her off. It cut off the light, plunging her back into the darkness of the world she thought she knew, leaving her alone with the ghost of the sister she never had. The last thing I saw before the door closed completely was my cousin Leo, pausing at the interior door. He gave her one long look, not of anger, but of profound disappointment, before he quietly shut the door, leaving her entombed in the silence of my real life. Then, she was gone from my thoughts. The mission was all that existed. The hours that followed were a blur of intense focus, a world away from suburban drama. I remember the feeling of the cold night air rushing in as we coordinated with the extraction. Team on the ground, my voice a calm, steady presence in their ears over the encrypted comms. I remember the tense, silent moments watching a satellite feed, my finger tracing. A path on the screen that would lead 3 terrified people to safety. There was a brief, successful exchange in the pre-dawn gloom, a flurry of controlled movement and clipped, professional acknowledgments. And then, the feeling of the transport plane's wheels leaving the tarmac. A powerful ascent carrying us away from danger and back towards home. It was just another Tuesday. 6 months passed, 6 months of silence from my family. No call, no angry text. Just a void. By then, my own world had expanded. I was no longer just an operative. I had been promoted to section chief. My new office was sparse and functional, with steel gray furniture and secure walls. But it had a large, triple-paned window that overlooked the secure government campus. This was my domain now. My days were spent not in the field, but in the command center, leading briefings and directing operations. The adrenaline of the mission was replaced by the heavy weight of responsibility for the people who still went out into the night. My team was my new family, a unit forged not by blood, but by mutual respect and shared risk. Leo was my lead analyst now, his brilliance finally given the scope it deserved. When I finished a briefing, outlining a complex operation with a dozen moving parts, there was no condescending praise. There was only a quiet exchange of knowing glances, a series of short, sharp nods from the professionals around the table. It was the only validation I had ever needed, the quiet approval of people, who understood the stakes, who knew exactly what I was capable of. They saw me for exactly who I was, and they trusted me with their lives. Just this morning, after a particularly grueling strategy session, I sat alone. At my desk, the quiet hum of the secure facility a comforting presence. I opened my personal laptop to check the time, and there it was. A single, unread email. The sender was Chloe Jensen. The subject line was just one word, Anna. My finger hovered over the mouse. I knew with absolute certainty what had happened in those 6 months of silence. Chloe had told them. She had told our parents everything, and the reality of who I was had shattered the comfortable fiction they had built around me. Their silence wasn't anger, it was fear. It was the paralyzing shame of knowing they had spent 30 years belittling a hero, of coddling a performer while ignoring a protector. They didn't know how to talk to Anna the librarian anymore, and they were terrified of Phoenix. Did this email contain an apology? A desperate plea for understanding? A final bitter accusation? For a moment, a flicker of the old me, the girl who just wanted her family to see her, was tempted to click. I almost needed to know. But then I looked up from the laptop screen, my gaze falling on the classified mission folders stacked neatly on my desk. I thought of the faces of the people on my team, the weight of the trust they placed in me. My peace was here, in this room. My legacy wasn't something they could give me or take away. It was in those folders, in the lives that were saved, in the quiet hum of this building where my real work was done. Their judgment was no longer a part of the equation. With a slow, deliberate movement, I dragged the unopened email into the archive folder. I didn't need to read it. I already had the answer I was looking for. I closed the laptop and turned back to the mission plans, my mind already 1,000 miles away, focused on the road ahead. My sister spent years judging the car I drove, never once thinking to ask about the road I was on. Now she knows. But it doesn't matter because I'm no longer looking in the rearview mirror.